Events follow one another in cause and effect, a logical sort of way. But the biblical texts of Advent point in another and much more mysterious direction, that time is not a line. Rather, time is something that exists in and through the being of God. Jesus even says this in the parable. He says, look, I'll tell you a story to explain this. It's like the fig tree and all the trees. He says it's like the seasons. Now, if we think about that for just a moment, what Jesus says, he says, when those leaves sprout, you know what time it is. When exactly do those leaves sprout? Are you out there looking at the trees to see the very second when time changes, when the season passes from spring to summer? Really, the seasons are sort of mysterious. That fig tree isn't that obvious. If we think about time being like the seasons, spring melding into summer, and summer folding into fall, and fall becoming winter, we understand that time is not a neat line, but instead it is a quiet passage of the interplay of action and reaction in which time sort of moves like this. A sort of spiral that floats in the direction of God's intention for us all. From this perspective, time is not a line. Indeed, time is timeless. When do the divisions of past, present, and future really mean? What do they really mean? When does the past become history? When does now cease to exist? When does the future begin? Time is not something that is easy to understand. Indeed, time is a bit of a wonder. It's not really science. It's a mystery. Thus, time and paying attention to time, that when Jesus says, pay attention to the signs of the end, he's asking us to notice the subtle shifts in the world around us, to be alert to where and when and how God is working in the world, to look for the buds of the reign of God on the trees around us, to await the moment in which those buds open into fullness. To pay attention to the signs of the end is a call to be mindful of the mystery of God's unfolding work through time. Now, if we enter into our Advent journey with this different understanding of time, the apocalyptic text might speak to us afresh. Indeed, the words of the liturgical prayer weekly reminds us of the mystery of God's redemptive time. Jesus has come, Jesus comes, and Jesus will come. This is the dance of time, the grace-filled steps that enact God's vision that the end times are all times, and that all times are indeed enfolded in the mystery of the end times. This spirit of the times enfolded in time, this is the spirit of knowing the holy mystery of God in human history, in which we walk through Advent. Jesus is about to be born, Jesus has been born, and we act as if we are still waiting for Jesus to be born. Time is unfolding, and the season draws ever closer. And if we look not only through these eyes of the mystery of time, but with the eyes of the realist at the words of Luke, we see something that is so true of the world around us. Jesus says people will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world. If we think about these are not words that are predictive of some far-off moment when all of a sudden the earth will quake. These are the words of now. Our cities, our churches, our towns, our own hearts are full of fear. We are living in a culture where there is so much fear. People who are afraid that their jobs are lost, that their income has been reduced, that health care is going to disappear. They're afraid of the loss of decency, of safety. People are terrified of change, of pluralism, of a world that they feel like is slipping away from them. All of the ofs. I'm afraid of this. The list of fear is nearly endless. But if we are honest when we look at Jesus' words and we think about this, is there ever a time in human history when people haven't been afraid? Luke's words are the words of all of our yesterdays. We may imagine that the past was better, safer, cleaner, or more stable, but that really wasn't the case. We are a fragile lot, we humans, and our history is roiled with the fear of our own insecurities and mortality, and the very stupid things that we do in order to avoid facing those fears. And if we understand what Luke is saying, that those fears are the fears we have now, they are the fears that our ancestors had yesterday, and they are most likely the fears that our children and grandchildren will have tomorrow. So is the gospel about escaping those fears? That's what our traditional version of apocalypse would say, is that one day God will come, rescue us, and free us from those fears. He will take us to heaven where we'll never have to face fear again. No, a different reading of the text suggests that apocalypse is always, and that the coming of Christ does not allow us to escape the world, but rather this idea that Christ has come drives us into a profoundly more realistic view of history, a view that should plunge us into realizing that God is with us as time unfolds mysteriously in our midst. The coming of Christ is not about escape. The coming of Christ is about seeing where God really is in the midst of it all. So Jesus says, when you see these things, do not cower in fear, for your transformation is drawing near. Advent teaches us that in the darkest places of human oppression, in the pain of hunger, in political distress, that God's reign is among us. Do not be caught off guard by the fear-filled tides of history, Jesus warned, but be mindful. Pray for strength, that you may be freed, liberated from the fears that roil the earth, and stand firmly with God. Amen.